Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Elevate Your Running podcast. My name is Sarah Manderscheid, your host of the Elevate Your Running podcast. We are on episode 108, and I'm just so excited because we have Fiona, we have Emily, we have Dakota, we have Connor, and we have Clayton heading to the Olympics to represent the United States of America in the marathon, the 26.2-mile race. And what an incredible race it was on Saturday morning. I absolutely loved it. My plans had shifted pretty drastically. I was planning to drive to Denver and go to a party, and I had been invited to several parties actually. And I was just so excited to be able to spend time with my friend Mary Lee and all of her friends that she invited to really just lean into all things running for a few hours and just like be a super run geek and just like soak it all in, right? I just love, love, love watching, even from the very beginning, the running form, the determination, how smooth these athletes look, right? And knowing that they were running in Orlando, we knew that the temperatures were going to be a little bit warmer, maybe slightly humid. I think that full sun that happened on Saturday was definitely a big, it definitely didn't help the athletes, right? It was kind of one of those things where if it was shaded, it probably would have felt a little bit different than that full sun. And it's just so incredible to see how these athletes flow through the uncomfortable temperatures, the course, that loop course. And it was just so cool to see. Now, if you have been listening, I have disclosed my top picks over the last few weeks. And, I think, okay, Emily made the top three for the women, which is incredible. Fiona, I wasn't expecting. This was her very first marathon. This was her marathon debut. And I have to say, like, when I saw her start to pull away at 18, I thought, one, it's very early, but two, she looks incredibly strong. And I think maybe we can all kind of tap into that like strong feeling that we've had in maybe like a workout or a long run. And she just took off. And just the way she was running, I was like, I don't think she's going to hit a wall today. She looks pretty darn good, right? Her last mile came in at 5:09, which is incredible. And then we have Connor and Clayton, who are teammates representing Team USA for the men. And what I love so much about them is one of their last miles was also a 5:09, but they were able to run together to really lean on each other. I think you could really see that true teamwork and partnership that comes with running. And it's one of the things that I love so much about running. And it's something that I really love about having like my own team and being able to like lean into them when you need them, have them lean into you when they need you, and to say like, hey, we got each other. Like I have not been shy about how much I love to chase certain teammates. And one teammate in particular, her name's Vanessa. I just absolutely love running behind her or next to her. Like we do have this really nice flow, or at least I feel like we have this really nice flow. I feel like I can count on her. I hope she feels like she can count on me. And we've been able to get each other through some tough workouts and some tough races together. And what I love about Connor and Clayton is that they like gave each other a little high five there with one lap to go. And it was basically like, let's do this thing together, which I love. I think so often running kind of can get kind of a bad rap for being like an individualized sport, but it is such a team sport in so many ways. Now, it can also be an individualized sport in a lot of ways. But there are so many great things about having a team and being out there. And I'm sure, Fiona and Emily and Dakota, all three of them probably felt that team unity within that pack towards the end, right? They're all there together. They're leaning on each other. They're leaning on their energy. Maybe not Fiona because she definitely took off after mile 18, but Emily and Dakota were really into it, until the last few miles where Emily started to pull away and Dakota was really kind of running solo with Sarah Hall and a few other athletes behind her. What I love so much about Dakota is how genuine she comes across. Now she is from Minnesota, so perks for that. I just love Midwestern like athletes. I love the just the kindness that can come from those athletes. Now, I'm not saying kindness can come from any athlete, but you could just like see how excited she was. She's still young to the sport, which is really exciting. I think she surprised herself. I love so much how the announcers were talking about how confident she was going into this race and how she told herself she was going to do it. And I really, really love that so much that I think on next week's episode, we're going to dive into more mental strength and visualization tips. And it's something that I've talked about with my team last week. I hope to do more research to be able to provide some different things that my team heard, but also some similar things that my team heard. Because at the end of the day, um, like one athlete loves to share with me, I've heard this already, and yes, you have. And there's so much goodness that can come from hearing mental strength tips again, or visualization tips again, or how to fuel and how to hydrate. Because at the end of the day, those are all things that can be a needle mover for us as we become stronger athletes and as we go through our running careers. So it's always something that we can kind of like hear again and listen to, and maybe we can take something new away in this new stage of training. So I hope to talk about that next week, but I am just so excited about this trials and everything this weekend. I have to say, one of a girl that I coach in Denver, her name is Sarah. She is fabulous. And she texted me today on Monday, and she's like, my feed is literally everything Olympics and Olympic trials and Taylor Swift. And I'm like, same, same, right? Like Taylor announced her new album last night at the Grammys, which was amazing to also hear. So for all of you Swifties out there, we're going to have some new music probably sooner rather than later. It'll be interesting to see when her single drops for that new album that's coming out in April, on April 19th. So there's so much goodness to talk about. But before we get into this week's episode, which if you listened to last week, just to quickly catch you up, we are going through, or I am going through some Q&As, questions that you are asking about your training, about racing, about your fueling. And I had so many questions, and I was so long winded in the first half of last week's episode that I'm going to try and get through the rest of these questions a little bit faster this week, for everyone's sake, and to try and keep this episode a little bit closer to 60 or 70 minutes. But also know if you have any other follow up questions, absolutely reach out. So, elevated moments. This is still something I want to continue. It's still something, it's something I started with in my coaching practice. So, of course, I'm going to continue it on the podcast. And I was on a run this morning. So, I had a 10-mile run this morning. And every so often on a Monday, I get a 10-mile like medium run. And I was thinking about like what my elevated moment would be for the podcast because I had a really tough weekend. And I've had a tough few weeks actually. And it's been harder to find the wins. And I don't always love to like share training wins, right? Like, oh yeah, I had a tempo and I was able to run through it. Or, oh yeah, I had a tempo and I was able to like flow through it. And it was tough. And I figured out a way to make it happen, right? And I was just thinking about how like tough the last like few weeks have been, last weekend in particular, and like what would be a win that would kind of be associated with that. And I don't know if I necessarily have one yet. But the key word is yet. But what I do love so much is that when I came home from my run, and typically what happens is I'm attached to my phone, which is actually part of the problem, and which is why I've had a difficult last few weeks. I'm attached to my phone, and I'm always like checking email, checking Instagram, checking Strava, like just checking all the notifications outside of the training app that my athletes use, right? And it's definitely a bad habit. It's definitely something I have to break. But what I loved so much is when I checked Instagram, a girl that I coach, her husband actually sent me a reel, and it just made me laugh and made me so happy and just like created that daily joy that I want in my life every day. And it was basically a reel about like Taylor Swift and like going through all the eras and singing. And if you're familiar, not familiar, I'm going to share like Taylor Swift trained very, very like long days on the treadmill. She would run her and sing to her set list every single day to prep for the tour. Now, my question is, she's had some downtime, some significant downtime between when the tour ended in South America and when it picks up again, like today. I guess if you're listening to this like on Thursday, she would have already had her first show. Like, when did she start picking up the training again? Was it modified because she had built such a good base? Like, there's so many questions I have about this, but the reel was all about like going through like the 2 hours and 47 minutes and going through a long round and like surging on the fast songs and maybe walk jogging on the slow songs. So I immediately reached out to this athlete that I coach and I said, your husband suggested we do this. I think we should. And it just brought me a lot of joy. And then, of course, there's other athletes like Sarah and Lindsay in Denver who love Taylor too, and like creating this like vibe on it. So my elevated moment is community and the gift of laughing and the gift of joy. And maybe in a few episodes, I'll be able to like crack the code on that first part of how I started the elevated moment with just like the last few weeks and being able to flow through that a little bit better. So there's a few elevated moments too I want to share that came in from athletes that I coach. So one athlete was at the trials over the weekend, which was so incredible for her. She lives in Minnesota, so woohoo, go Minnesotans! And she actually was supposed to run her long run in Florida. She was super excited about it. They ended up changing their flight, so she needed to do her long run with quality people. This was with marathon quality. After she got off the flight, so she literally landed, they got home. She said she dropped her suitcase. She put on her running shoes, which meant she was already wearing her running clothes. And she went out there and just absolutely smashed a 12-mile long run with a 5K at marathon pace. And not just a 5K at marathon pace, it was a 5K at marathon pace less 10 seconds. So we're shooting for that 8 minute per mile, which is that BQ time for her. And she just clocked in a metronome 750, 751, 750. It was beautiful. And I feel like that's such a win because I think, especially if you live in a cold climate right now and you're going to a warm climate to kind of visit friends, or maybe you were at the trials, or you're, going on a family trip, or you're going to Disney, whatever the case is, it can get when plans change and things shift and something is kind of maybe not taken away from you, but it's happening to you, right? Or happening for you, not to you, happening for you. It can sometimes be hard to shift through that. But this gal, like, absolutely shifted through it, made it a huge win, and she crushed it. And I'm just so excited for her. And she also has, I think, this like renewed energy from being at the trials and like all of the activities that they had. And I guess I wasn't quite sure how many like events and activities they were going to have, but it felt like very similar to like the Boston Marathon or a really big major, maybe even bigger than that, where there were like a ton of former elites everywhere. Every single shoe brand was there. Every single like electrolyte or gel people were there. Companies were there. Like everyone was there, and everyone had shakeout runs and group runs and so many fun things going on. So she has this like renewed sense of, I think, like just excitement with running, which I love so much because hey, it's like February if you're listening to this live or like somewhat live. And motivation, especially in the month of January, can be very difficult to get out the door. Like I had a very difficult time getting out the door this morning. I'm just very, very tired. And I think we can all kind of like land into that, right? It's like maybe the weekend wasn't like what we needed to feel rejuvenated, or maybe the last few weeks of like work has been extra stressful, or just longer hours, or maybe both, right? Or maybe we're flowing through a niggle and that's just creating a lot of extra, right? So being able to shift and kind of pivot and create these wins, and feel this renewed sense of like energy is so, so, so important. So I'm really, really proud of that athlete. And the other elevated moment comes from an athlete who is coming back from an injury. And he is getting back into training, getting back into like a consistent routine with training, which is really big when you come back from an injury. And he feels really good. And I'm just so proud of him because he's doing everything he needs to do outside of running right now to set him up for success. So before the injury, which was a non-running injury, there was a lot of things that needed to kind of shift and happen with his training, but there just wasn't time. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. When you're in a heavy training cycle, you're in a big marathon prep, sometimes just getting the run done for the day is the win. And to add in mobility, to add in strength, to add in proper like sleep is sometimes really difficult, especially if you are a parent and you have young kids and there's like so many different things that go on, right? So this athlete is really showing up. He's really dedicated. He's super positive, and he's coming back stronger and better than ever. And he's really leaning into the strength component, which is, I think, going to be a big needle mover for him in 2024. So I'm really excited for him. And he's making the time to do it, which is also great. And I think maybe the biggest one out of all of this that he hasn't said to me, but that I see it in him, is that when we had a conversation about getting him back on track with a schedule and training, we originally had his workout scheduled on a Wednesday, but he wasn't able to get strength in. And so I brought the question up of like, well, do we need to move your workout day? And he's like, yeah, actually, we do. And I never really thought to ask you that. So we shifted it to Tuesday. Now he also has time to do strength. So it's a win win. His rest days are staying the same. And now his Wednesday gets to be a really lovely recovery day for him when it's probably, where I know it's one of those really busy work days for him. It's probably a little bit stressful. I think anytime we have like back to back days or back to back meetings in a day, it can create a lot of stress, right? So now he has like a nice, easy recovery run before he goes into like that really busy day at work. And I think that's like setting him up for success. And he's going to start to feel the wins kind of just from that alone. So, really, really proud of him. If you have an elevated moment to share, feel free to reach out. You can do that over Instagram at Elevate Your Running. And of course, through email at Sarah at elevateyourrunning.com. All right, now let's get into this week's episode. We are in part 2 of Q&A time. So we're going to jump right into a strength training question. And this question comes from Instagram. And she asks, does strength training help speed or only prevent injury? And I love this question so much because as athletes, as runners, oftentimes we don't even want to talk about strength training, right? We just want to run. We just want to lace up the shoes and run. And some of us don't even want to run, right? I mean, I'm a coach, I see it all. So I love this question because strength training is like, it's the gift that keeps on giving. So, running, obviously, like for most of us, it can fill our soul. It can give us so much life. It can give us purpose. It can be our why, or our why is attached to getting out the door and training. It could be our therapy. It could be our form of socialization. It could be our form of like having something that we're striving for outside of being like a wife or a husband or a parent or a coworker or whatever, right? It can kind of be like our own thing. And what I love so much about strength training is that it really is one of those things that everyone can do, that it is so buildable, and it's going to be something that continues to come back to give you the gift of speed and health. So, a few weeks ago, I was having a really big training week. And I was coming off of the week before a big training week with a very big strength training week, very big, like 4 sessions. And um, it was a lot. And I wasn't recovering well because I just like did a little bit too much and I wasn't really doing what I needed to do to recover. And it's something I know better. And every single cycle, I learn my lesson and then I get back on the train. So that week that I was really like leaning into recovery, I removed strength training. And even though I know that when you're doing strength training, taking a week off is not going to necessarily hurt you, it is something that I think you notice, but it's not something that you don't notice if you're not doing it, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. So the week that I was training and not doing strength training. I had two very difficult workouts. I felt flat. I felt like I didn't have any gauges or any like pace gauges, any dials. I couldn't turn my pace dial. And it was really defeating. And after I kind of reflected on my second workout, that was just kind of like, ugh. I evaluated the things that I needed to work on, but then I remembered, I was like, oh, you know what? You took all your strength out this week because I was very, very worried I was going to dig myself into a hole. And I think I like overdid it by like not doing any strength where I could have just like modified strength, right? So what does strength training do? That whole story was to share with you that strength training is one of those pieces where you can absolutely feel it, right? So it's going to be one of those things that not only helps with your speed and your speed development, it's going to help you so much in the last few miles of your race, whatever race that may be. And it's also going to keep you happy and healthy, right? So it absolutely strengthens your muscles to not only improve the movement, but it also creates a lot of power in the athlete. And those muscles that you're building in the gym or with the mobility or with, I should say, like the resistance band, those muscles are working at the right moment to help you run your workouts stronger, have your long runs be more efficient, and really finding that extra gear for your best race ever, right? So let me back up. Strength training cannot 1000% be preventative, right? It does not have to be heavy. It does not have to be long, right? It can really be 10 minutes a day. And I highly recommend if you're new to the podcast, or maybe you've listened to this episode before, but it's been like 150 episodes plus ago. It could be good to just listen to it again. We have episode 53 with Jason Fitzgerald, and he talked all about kind of that, like getting into strength training and how important it can be. And it really can just be 10 minutes a day, and it can look like more mobility and body weight, right? If you're getting into it, it can look like planks and squats and single leg deadlifts and glute bridges and using your band for monster walks and have more of that mobility focus, but you're still using some of your body weight as well to kind of create a stronger athlete. And I actually highly, highly recommend if you are an athlete that is just solely running right now and you're not doing anything like this, to really build in maybe 3 days a week, 10 minutes a day. Let's start with mobility. Let's start with some body weight. You're going to want to do it after your run, right? Or maybe later on in the day if that serves you. Mobility can be done before a run, but definitely weighted body weight, strength weight, or strength training, heavy weight should not really be done before a run. Always after. So you want to think of it as like your primary sport that you're focused on should come first, and your secondary, which would be strength, come second, or in order of that for the day. So it doesn't need to be overly complicated. It can be something that you just start, right? Starting's the hardest part. But starting, add it to your schedule, find 3 days a week. Maybe it's going to be that workout day, that long run day, and then on like a Monday, which is always a great day to do extra mobility in my mind. And then build into it. So once you feel like those exercises, like you're doing them well, you have good form with them, you up the ante a little bit, right? So maybe it's instead of a 60-second plank, you do like a 90-second plank. Or I took a yoga class a few weeks ago and the teacher had us do like a 2-minute plank. And then I had strength the next day and had to do like not two 60-second planks. And I was like done, right? So planks, I guess, are my weakness. I get to work on them. But a 2-minute plank is also very hard. Okay, now I'm getting sidetracked. So you can up the ante, right? You can do squats with weights, squats with a kettlebell. You can do single leg deadlifts with a weight or add your reps. You can do glute bridges with a harder resistance band or a tighter, heavier resistance band, right? You can do monster walks with that black resistance band over the red resistance band. So just slowly increasing is really going to help you. And then I would just continue to build into it. So if you do want to add heavier strength, I would maybe break it up into like 2 30-minute sessions until you feel strong enough to start creeping up. And it could be 2 45 minutes or 2 by 60 minutes, right? I think sometimes it depends on one, how heavy the weight is that you're using, how much downtime you're going to need in between your strength. Like sometimes I do heavy strength and then I try and multitask and I'm like answering athlete texts and I'm answering DMs and I'm trying to do other things in between sets. And then all of a sudden I'm like, ooh, I probably rested a little bit too long, right? So sometimes it could be like creeping up on that 60 minutes when really you could probably like get it all done in 45 if you really wanted to, right? So it's very, very it's a huge piece to training. It's one of those things that I highly recommend for every athlete. And if it's something that you say, like, oh, coach, I can't fit this into my schedule, very similar to that second elevate moment with an athlete that I coach, it's finding a way to make it work. So it's reducing mileage, finding a way to fit it in, and then start to build up your mileage a little bit if you can. And then typically what happens there is you figure out a way to balance it all. Sometimes when you're stressed for time, it's tough to fit in something you don't want to do. And I think 90% of us don't love strength training. We'd much rather be running. But if you take some of the running out, add the strength, and then you say, do you have time for a little bit more running? The athlete's like, yeah, I can do that. And it definitely helps. So, something else you can do is absolutely build in more plyometrics, explosive movements, or lateral movements. And what I love so much about this is that you can train your muscles so much differently than how we use them for running. So, you could think about like box jumps, you could think about like broad jumps, like leaning back into a jump, extend your arms back behind you and jump in front of you as hard or as long as you can, kind of like that long jump that we used to do in elementary school or high school at track, right? Except you're not running into it, you're just standing still. But having those like explosive movements is also going to really help train your muscles to be able to help you in those moments when you're ready to turn the dial on the gear in a race. And if you don't have power, or if you're getting cramps at the end of a race, you get to work on strength training. Now, cramps could also be something related to dehydration, absolutely. But if you are someone who's like, it wasn't a warm race, I felt really hydrated, and you're cramping, highly, highly, highly recommend starting to add strength training basics and then building into it to have it not only prevent injury, but to also help train with speed. So how does it prevent injury? It's going to really up level your glutes, your hips, your hamstrings, your calves, your ankles, your feet, all depending on what you end up doing, your core, right? And if you can have stronger muscles, that those muscles in your body are going to be able to take more of that day-to-day running that we do, right? It's going to be able to do more for you. It's also going to help recruit the muscles when you need them the most in your speed sessions, in your long runs, and in your race to be able to find that explosive power at the end. So, quick story. Started running in 2017, back into it, right? That was like my second life with running. And I wasn't doing a whole lot of strength training at all. I was just doing like a little bit of classes here and there. And then cut to 2021, I got back into, or I started Legree, which is kind of like Pilates on a reformer machine. And I was taking that twice a week. And this was to prepare me for the Boston Marathon. And I'm laughing because now I know that that's like, it's good, but it's not good enough. And I took 2 classes a week. But for me at that time, it was very hard. I felt my muscles were very fatigued after each class, and it was like a lot for me, right? So it's like meeting yourself where you're at and then building, right? So I did that, and then it was last summer, so the summer I guess of 2023. So I was taking Legree twice a week for like maybe 18 months. My coach, it was on a track on a Wednesday morning, and I remember she's like, "So I know you take like Mecca is what it's called. I know you take Mecca, so like talk to me about that. Like, what are you doing?" So I explained to her like how the class works, what we're doing, and she's like, I want you in the gym like once a week for sure. And I was already in like my Chicago build at this point, and I'm like, oh, okay, sure, I'll do whatever you want. she's like, um, she's like, I'll give you what you need. It's really going to help you in the last 10K of the race. Now, the I was maybe like 8 weeks out from Chicago. Did it help? I don't know. I ran the best race of my life in Chicago, so maybe, but I think there was a lot of other things working in my favor for that. But what was so cool is once I recovered from Chicago, which was oh, I guess that was the summer of 2022. Anyone else feel like they're off on years? I feel like this is a thing. So it was the summer of 2022. And um, went into knowing I had Boston the following spring. She's like, now we're going to do, you've been doing one heavy day a week. Mm, now we're going to do two. I'm like, okay, whatever you want, coach. And ended up doing 2 sessions a week, and it was a lot. And then once we started marathon training, I pulled it back to like one, maybe two, kind of depending on the week. And then after marathon training, maybe you're getting a sense of this pattern. After marathon training, I went into speed work last summer, and then we definitely added two in. And I had 2 sessions of Legree. So I was doing 4 sessions a week. I was in the best shape of my life last summer. I felt incredibly strong. I felt fit. I felt fast, but this was all under a huge layer of heat and running in hot temperatures. So I didn't actually get those benefits until the fall, but it created so much power and so much strength that now it's something where if I don't do it, I can see it in my training. I can see it in my body. I can feel it in my body. And that's a really cool place to be. So I'd love to hear your experience with strength training, what you guys are doing, what you're not doing, what you can lean into. But episode 53 with Jason Fitzgerald, who is the founder of the Strength Running Podcast, is a great episode to deep dive a little bit more into other things that you can do to kind of help with your speed and also prevent injury and have that injury prevention around strength training. All right, so question number 2 is what is the best timing for water and food intake before training so it's digested properly? This is from Jessers95. Great question, Jess. Episode 87 is all about how to feel your way through training and racing with Megan Featherston. She is a registered dietitian. She is awesome, and I highly, highly, highly recommend that episode. I was very, very lucky to be able to connect with her. And that was through a mutual athlete or client of ours. And to get her time to be able to come on the podcast. And it's a great episode. And an answer that I say a lot, many times a day, is that it depends, right? Everyone's so different when it comes to timing with your water and your food intake because everyone's different, right? And I think the longer that you train, the definitely the easier it is to figure out what's going to work for you and what's not going to work for you. But what I love so much about training is that it really is that time to play around and figure out what is going to work the best for you and what's just not going to work for you, right? So I would, rule of thumb maybe to say is the best timing is, let's say you're a morning athlete, you'll want to give yourself enough time to have it digest. And that's going to mean knowing how sensitive your stomach is and what works and what doesn't work for you in the morning. So if you're going out for a recovery run, an easy run, a banana is awesome. If you're going into a workout, so I have Wednesday workouts, I usually leave my house at like 6:20ish in the morning for that. So I'm up by 5:30 and I have a little bit of coffee, I have a little bit of water, and then I usually eat like cereal and a banana. And then my secret weapon is for workouts. I bring gels with me and I take gels during my workout because cereal and a banana, mm, at least if I'm running 10 or 12 miles, I guess it all depends on your workout, really isn't, it's enough, but it's also not enough depending on the week. So you really want to know like what's going to work, what's not going to work for you, and giving yourself enough time. So the best timing is going to be unique to you. If you need extra time to digest, take something that's easily digestible, like a banana, like a piece of toast, or a gel. Gels are awesome to take because, hello, we take them while we run, right? So, like, why wouldn't we eat them before we go out for a morning workout if it's something where you're waking up and rolling out the door to go, right? I think there's definitely some of us that do that. I've been in that camp of athletes in my previous life, and it's just something, you have to find your way through, right? And if you're someone who says, well, I love to run in the morning, but I'm not necessarily hungry in the morning, you have to find a way to eat, because ultimately, the more that you eat, the more days that you can train your stomach to go out for an easy recovery long run workout with something in your stomach, the easier it will be to train on race morning, right? So finding that way to get something down. Now, Morton makes a shake, which is high carb. A lot of people really like it. If you know you could drink something like that and not have to stop to go to the bathroom 87 times, congratulations, take the shake and go. But if you know that that's going to be a problem, like maybe sticking with very little liquid, but then focusing more on like gels or a banana, or the honey stinger waffles are super great too to easily digest, get out the door and go. Now, if you're running a workout, easy recovery run at night, this is going to be a little bit different. The older I get, the harder it is for me to run at night. And it's all based on food. I have to be very, very, very intentional with what I eat throughout the day and making sure I don't have too much fiber too close to the race, because or to the run, otherwise I get a side stitch and my stomach starts to cramp up, and that doesn't feel good, right? That doesn't feel good at all. So if you are going into like an evening run or an evening workout, it's very, very similar, where you want to maybe have a normal lunch, have a snack, maybe 90 minutes to 2 hours before your workout. And then definitely after you get that warm up in and before you go into your workout, take a gel, really fuel your body. You may or may not need a gel going into like a recovery easy run. Today I ran my 10-mile run a little bit later than normal because I wanted to get through one chunk of my day. I'm working on like using one side of my brain for like in the morning, and then like my other side of the brain for the afternoon. So I was really like analytical, and I was in athlete plans and responding to comments, and shifting a lot of training plans around. And that's like one whole like mindset. And then I knew I got to record this podcast episode today. So I'm like, okay, great. I'm gonna like run, and it's gonna be awesome. And I'm gonna shower and get ready and record this podcast. And it's gonna be like part of my afternoon and how I spend my afternoon. And I brought gels with me. Now, obviously, it's also a 10-mile run, but I typically bring gels with me just in the off chance that I need them. And I think that's such a nice training hack that a lot of people don't talk about. Is like, especially if you are training a lot, you might really need that gel with you. So I would definitely bring one with you. But, you know, to circle back to this question, it's all going to be based on you and what you need. Rule of thumb is 90 minutes before. Some people can go 60. I can go 60 depending on what I'm eating and what I'm running. And sometimes I can't go 60, right? Sometimes I can go 30. Sometimes it needs to be like 90 or 2 hours, depending on what I'm eating, right? So it's all going to depend. But episode 87 is awesome with Megan Featherston. The next question is, what are distances you can build into a training cycle as tune-ups for various distances? This is a great question. I think when I was early into my coaching career, I was very into tune-up races. Everyone needed a tune-up if they were running a marathon. And the more the more I coach, the more I see athletes like stacking training cycles, the longer I work with athletes, tune ups aren't always necessary, right? I think there is something to be said about just getting in a beautiful 12-week training cycle without going into a race mentality or a race mindset. Um, but if you are someone that really does want a tune up, if you are someone that finds a lot of value in racing during a build because maybe it chunks it up for you a little bit better than a 12-week or 16-week cycle with no racing, it does rust bust out some of the nerves that can creep up on race day if you don't race often. So there are some real awesome benefits to tune ups. I always say rule of thumb is half the distance to your A goal race. So if you're racing a marathon, you could race a half marathon as your tune up, right? If you're racing a half marathon as your A goal, you can race a 10K. And if you're racing a 10K as your A goal, you can race a 5K. And those distances and those times can kind of give you an idea of where you can fall in your A goal race, but it's not always certain. And there's always things that can happen, right? So my my race times don't necessarily, or my tune-ups in races don't necessarily jive. Some of them do, some of them don't, right? I think what's really important to know is tune-ups are great, like I said, as a rust buster for you to practice your race day morning, which is also what you can do on long run days, everyone. And you can test out your race day. You can test out your nutrition. You can test out your mental strength. Um, you can test out your racing shoes, which is a big deal. But I think there has to be this balance between racing a tune up and also recovering really well because it can disrupt a training cycle. I am very, very fortunate that last fall when I raced my half in Indy, I didn't get a day off for another 13 days, something like that. I haven't shared about my rest days, but I don't get many rest days a month. I get two a month. And they're every other Thursday. And I took, my coach gave me a rest day the week of the race. And then I was really surprised that the next week it was all like 8 mile days. Except for my workout and long run, which we'll get to later in this episode. And yes, I am going to talk about why I did a 25-mile long run in that CIM prep. But I didn't get a day off, and it was very risky, but I think she knew that I was recovering really well and I was going to take my runs really slow, which is I do anyways. I'm very good about that. I do not push pace if it's not there. And so we worked around it and it ended up working in my favor. I didn't get hurt and I didn't really like nothing really happened. I just continued to train. And then throughout that week, every run, I just felt better and better. And it took until about Friday of that week, following week to feel better. But I've had situations where athletes have run a half tune up and then have completely fallen apart after that. And they haven't been able to get back on the training cycle for their A goal race. Whether that's a niggle comes up or they suddenly become unmotivated because they just had this amazing goal in this tune up, right? So a lot of different things can happen. And I think it's really, really, really important to, whether you're working with a coach or not, to understand what you want to do. Know what you want to do and what makes you happy and what fills your cup. And if you are working with a coach, to definitely communicate that and communicate it well so you feel seen and heard, or that coach is asking a lot of questions. And then going from there. So, like, if you don't run a tune up for this next A goal race, it doesn't make you any different of an athlete than the other athlete that is running a tune up, right? I think there can be a lot of good that can come from it. Like, obviously, you're working on speed, you're working on speed development. Let's say you're running a half and you end up running like 7:30 pace for your half marathon and you're looking to Boston qualify with that 8 minute per mile average for that marathon. I would say chances are you can do it as long as the course is apples to apples, right? Like, that's the other thing, is these tune-ups really should simulate your A goal race. They don't have to, but they can. and you get a closer glimpse as to what you're capable of if they are very similar, right? I ran 6:39 pace on a flat course for 13.1 miles. And then in okay weather, Indy was not as great as I know it can be in Indy. But then cut to 5 weeks later, I'm running a hilly course on like very warm conditions, right? Very, I would say it was very similar to Orlando. I think when I finished, it was like 64 degrees. So in Orlando, it was 71, but our humidity was a lot higher, which makes a difference, right? So if you have a tune up, try and find a course that simulates what you're going to be doing for your A goal race. And what I really love is the 5K tune up for every race distance. And why I love this is because one, who doesn't love a fast 5K? Two, you can definitely build it into your training week. It doesn't have to be a race. Three, it's quite a bit cheaper. You can probably find a local one and you can just let it rip. It's an amazing it's an amazing speed workout. Five, it's an amazing speed workout if I haven't said that yet. And six, it really does produce a race that most athletes feel really good about, and the recovery time is quite a bit shorter than, let's say, a half marathon or a 10K even. So that recovery is a huge piece, especially if you are kind of in that marathon build or half marathon build. And it's something to really be concerned, to really understand about yourself. And um, at the end of the day, too, if you don't want to race, don't race, right? Like I was supposed to race a 5K last weekend and I wasn't excited about it. I didn't want to do it. It was local and the weather gods came in and we had this huge snowstorm, so I couldn't run it anyways. But I'm like, this is such a good reminder, Sarah. Like, really stick to what you love to do, which is sea level, flat, and fast. Don't try and be anyone else. Don't try and do things to think like it's going to be fun, because at the end of the day, you're still going to have to recover that week leading into the race a little bit and taper down a little bit and all the things. So really think about that as you're going into tune-ups, but they can be highly, highly beneficial. And I think they're more beneficial for a newer athlete than a well-seasoned athlete. Okay, what are some exercises to build strong legs to tackle a hilly course like Boston if you can't go to a gym and use machines? This is from Judy. Judy's running Boston. Hey, Judy. Judy's amazing. And there's so many great exercises and things that you can do to build strong legs to tackle a hilly course. So, one thing that we're doing in her training is she does a lot of treadmill running. So, we're varying the incline throughout different types of runs. So that's going to be huge to just build the muscle in your leg from that incline running. If you have access to hiking and high elevation, or not even high elevation, but gaining elevation during your hike, that's going to be huge too. So if you live in Colorado, North Carolina, I know there's going to be other places too where there's like just some good elevation gain. I know Baltimore, I have some athletes who live in Baltimore, and Baltimore is just hilly if you're walking around. It's going to build muscles in your legs, which will make it easier to tackle a hilly course. That's one. And if you do live in a place where you can hike and you are gaining some really good elevation in that hiking, add a cross training day in to supplement a run, and you're going to come through the training cycle so fast, right? But some other things that you can do that don't necessarily, you don't have machines, but maybe you just have body weight or you just have weights. Lunges and squats, awesome. Lateral lunges, awesome. Bulgarian split squats, woo, burner, also awesome. But you're probably not saying awesome while you're doing them, but you will say awesome when you're running a hilly course. I guarantee you that. Box jumps are super great. If you don't have a box to jump on, or like a low, like step thing, like going outside and using stairs, just be careful with what you're doing, what you're jumping on. You want it to be very, very stable. Bounds are really great. And that's more of a drill, but broad jumps are also amazing. And I talked about those earlier, where you're jumping from a standing position, squatting down, reaching your arms back behind you, and then jumping in front of you as far as you can. Those are all going to be awesome, and they're all going to move the needle. I'm so excited for the Elevate Boston crew this year because I reached out to my coach and she put together a strength plan for them, and they are going to be so strong. So strong. Like everyone is doing their strength work. And I am just so excited because when it comes to running a hilly course, whether it's Boston or another hilly course, you really do need to have that power and the strength, like we talked about in that first question, from these exercises to really give you that oomph when you're trying to get up and over the hill. And the last thing you really want to do is is to like feel weak on a course like that, or to get cramps, right? You want to feel powerful, you want to feel strong, and doing these exercises to build the strong legs will help tremendously. Now, you can do all of this too watching your favorite TV show in the living room too, which is what I love. Why don't you just throw in a 60-second core or 60-second plank routine while you're at it at the end, and go through this like a little cycle, and it could be a lot of fun. You can enroll your spouse or your kids too. If you have a dog, I definitely know dogs will be like in your face as you're trying to do some of these things. Um, but there's a lot of ways to make wins and create wins if you don't have access to a gym, or heavy machines or heavy weights. All right, so we're going to get into a mindset question. Tips to recover mentally after a not so great race. Now, this comes from Becky, and Becky raced a 5K a few weekends ago. She is in a big marathon prep, and we were thinking she was going to like rip something fast off, right? And sometimes that just doesn't happen. And that's part of training, unfortunately. Like, you absolutely want tune ups or races in a cycle to land on the right day, right? But I think there's, you definitely want to plan these tune ups too. Like, I last fall had all of my races set in August. And when you're racing locally, one, and two, throwing in a race within a week's notice, I think it can be really hard to like get into that mindset, right? And we definitely know that a lot of nerves were kind of released in this 5K race that Becky ran, which is awesome for her. But how do you recover mentally after a not so great race? One, everyone's going to be different. And two, it's going to be very different for everyone, right? So, episode 47 has mindset tips from sports psychologist Dr. Ross. He lives in Denver. I call him the team sports psychologist. He's also the sports psychologist for a lot of elite runners. He's also the sports psychologist for other sports teams and running teams, which is amazing. Relentless Runners being one of them. And I just love them so much and look up to them so much. Um, and knowing that, I think first and foremost, when you're going through a race like that, you are not your results, right? Some days are going to be not so great days. And that's part of training, especially if you're in a big buildup for a marathon cycle. And there's just going to be days that just don't land. And I think after talking with Becky too, I think she's in a better space because we know that every day is a different day in training, right? We reviewed and evaluated the outside factors going into this race, things happening in her personal life, things happening that morning of the race. We also kind of reviewed nutrition. And I think that's a great benefit to a tune up race. If it doesn't go so well, is you can learn so many things about what you're doing, what you can be doing differently so you can show up a little bit stronger next time, and knowing and staying like kind of neutral on it. Like if you have a not so great race, but you've been having these amazing workouts and these long runs, that's what you should be leaning into and knowing like that's who you are as an athlete. And this one day on this random weekday or weekend, in the middle of a Sunday morning isn't defining you as an athlete, right? So I think it's like really leaning into that, but then also having the right expectations of like where you are now as an athlete, where you are right now in training, and where you want to go. And knowing that there are going to be some bumps in the road. Sometimes we have to take a step back to take a few steps forward. I'm in that right now, not in training, but as a business owner, right? There's some things that shift and pivot, and you have to have the right expectations. If you have the right expectations and can stay neutral and say, yes, I acknowledge this happened. This is what I could do better. This is what I did great. So I'm going to continue to do that next time. Amazing. You're going to do awesome next time. Trying to stay as positive as you can too is really going to help. And I highly recommend journaling about your feelings and journaling about how you're feeling, what worked, what didn't work, what can be better next time. And that could be on everything: the race itself, the time of the race, when you had breakfast, what you did that weekend, how you set yourself up for success that week, what your mindset, what you were telling yourself when you were running. Did you wear race shoes? Was your race kit like, were you not wearing enough clothes or were you too warm, right? Like all of those things play a huge factor. Were you dehydrated? Did you take a gel before the race? All those things, just kind of write it down, evaluate, and then make a plan for next time. And if you have a coach, you can make a plan with them. What I really love is when an athlete makes their own plan and then they share it with me. What I love so much about that is that they are being proactive, they understand what they need to do, and they're learning and growing as an athlete with me as their partner, and we're side by side in their on their path to doing what they want to do with running. All right, so our next question is under the racing category, which is pacing strategies during a race. Well, my athletes know, anyone that I coach knows that I love a good progression. And I think and know progression isn't always the coolest thing to do, right? A lot of men actually share with me how like they go out really hard and blow up and they love that so much. And I'm thinking, well, if you love that so much, you can continue to do that. I actually don't know many females that have that mindset. So I would love to maybe take a poll on that. We should take a poll on that. If you are a female and you love to go out hard and blow up and just see what you can do, let's talk. I want to hear about this. There has to be something in like the competitiveness around it. I don't know. It's wild, but I love a good progression. And what progressions can look like is going to be different to the athlete, and it's going to be different based on the course that you're running. And then, of course, also um, the distance that you're running, right? So, a lot of people in a marathon go out way too fast all the time, and then they blow up. If you can start out slow, my Houston girls did an incredible job of this, and Chris gets to be part of that too. I had 4 athletes. They all did a beautiful progression, absolutely crushed the race strategy. They followed it to a T and they went for it when they needed to go for it. If you can start out slow, and I'm not saying jog, I'm not saying run an easy pace, but maybe you're running 5, 10, 15 seconds slower than what you want to average in that first mile, first 2 miles. If it's the marathon, it could be the first 5K or 10K. You will have, and if you're properly trained, you will have so much gas at the end of a run, at the end of a race, where you're going to be able to push and find a new gear. So I've had athletes even say like, but coach, I didn't start out too fast. It's like, well, sometimes in a race, whether it doesn't matter what distance it is, if you're running 5 seconds under goal pace or 5 seconds too fast, and that's like 3, 4, 5 miles, that's going to catch up to you, right? It is. It can sometimes be that little. So I love a really nice progression. A lot of athletes that I coach, I love to give progression long runs because it does start to like train their mind on what we're going to be doing on race day to get them familiar with it. Because the ultimate, to me, success is hearing athletes say, I slept great the night before my race because I felt really confident going into the race because I knew our plan was something I had already practiced. Or they put that together. some athletes put it together after the race, which is fine. Um, so a nice progression is amazing. It's going to set you up for success. My Strava account is a progression every single day. I think even in my easy and recovery runs, it kind of has to be a progression because I run up. So every day is basically like 8 miles, and I run up 4 miles, which is about 300 or 400 feet of gain, and then I run down. So it's easy to progress every single day, but I practice it every single day. And all my races are progression. CIM was a progression, it was just a positive progression. The plan was to actually progress down from where I started, but it didn't happen that day. And that's okay. There were outside factors kind of going into that. So I love, love, love a good progression. And maybe that could be an entire episode all on its own. Why do I need to go to the bathroom during every race? Now, this is a great question from Sarah. And no, I did not write this question, although I should have, because I'm always needing to go to the bathroom when I run. And hopefully this isn't TMI, but it's just like one of those things where we're not talking like having like a situation. We're just talking about feeling like you have the urge to go to the bathroom, right? And I think a lot of runners can relate to this. I think a lot of moms can relate to this. And I think a lot of like females, as we get older, this becomes more and more of something that we're thinking about. And I don't know if men actually go through it because I don't hear them talking about it. So I'd love to hear feedback on that too. But what I gave I gave Sarah some feedback of like, I asked more questions about like, well, how much are you drinking before you're going into racing? And I really suggest that like, if you're going into a race and you need to stop and use the bathroom, let's say at the first 5K, 10K, two things. There's two ways you could do this. One, this happened to me at the Chicago Marathon. And I looked down the street, and for anyone who cares, the Chicago Marathon porta potties are down an entire block. So you have to like run down a block to get to the porta potties and then get back on the course. And when I saw that, I was like, I don't have to go that bad. I'm not ruining my time for that. That is crazy. Sometimes it can be nerves. And that's what mine was, because as soon as I saw that and I was like, you're not going to the bathroom, I was fine. And I continued to drink and hydrate like throughout the entire race, didn't need to stop to use the bathroom. Now, there's going to be some times where you do. And I would say, one, you need to evaluate how many, or how much electrolytes you're taking in the days prior to the race. You should be taking in electrolytes so you're not just taking in water and you're not just getting rid of everything in your system. If you don't have electrolytes in your system, it's going to be harder to hold in what you need to hold in. And two, you're going to be depleted faster. So you're going to be taking in more water, and then it's like a whole cycle. So on race morning, I really love taking in a little bit of water with electrolytes, taking a few shots of espresso, and shutting the hydration station down. Now, this is my own personal preference. This is what I do. It works well. I can typically then go to the bathroom like 2 times during my warm up. There's always that second time where you're like, just got to go as you're waiting for like the race to start. And then you get into the race and you're good and you can drink and you can do all the things. But let's say you're in a marathon and you're getting to like mile 20 and you're needing to stop to use the bathroom because you've just taken in too much. I think that's a good thing to know, that one, either that's going to happen and you're going to have to do it. And two, if you don't want to stop, maybe not drink as much. And this is going to be one of those things that it depends on every single athlete. You get to kind of practice and train on what's going to set you up for success the most. But I would say if it's like a morning thing and it's really something that's coming in on the first 5K or the very first few miles of a race, could be nerves, and maybe pull back a little bit how much you're consuming before the actual race. Because ideally, most of your hydration is happening most of your hydration is happening during race week, and you're not over hydrating because we don't want to do that, but we do want to hold a certain level of hydration that we've been maintaining throughout training and upping the electrolytes, especially if we know that we're going to have a warm race. Okay, there's a few more questions. And now these were all questions that were geared towards me and like some of my favorite things and whatever. So it's going to be a quick, let's see, we have 5 questions. Okay, so favorite nutrition during a race. Okay, so I love to mix it up. I train with Spring Energy Awesome Sauce every 3 miles. Now, this has 180 calories, 44 grams of carbohydrates. This works for me. And it doesn't work for me around mile 18. And I know that. So I will take a gel every 3 miles. Let's say I'm running a marathon. Every 3 miles, I mix it up and I take a Morton calf gel at mile 15 because that caffeine will hit when I want it to hit in a marathon. And then I know I need to wait 4 miles and then I resume my gels again. And that works for me. You absolutely have to train with these gels. What I love so much about Spring Energy is that it's all natural. I have not heard one person who's used it and they've had stomach issues from it. It is a little bit pricier, so that's going to be something to be cautious of. There is a link in the description notes to sign up for a feed.com account. Through that link, you get $20 in credit for every quarter, which is awesome. I don't get anything for it, but I just love giving back to athletes and the running community. So that's something that I've partnered with the feed on. So it's something that you can definitely use to help support your training. So Spring Energy Awesome Sauce, it's green. I love the Spring Energy Cranberry, which is 100 grams of, or 100 calories, like 25 grams of carbohydrates. That one's delicious. It's like strawberry and cranberry together. The Morton Calf Gel, which is the white sleeve. And then during my workouts, I use the Scratch Chews, which I love because chews are kind of hard to eat during a race. So I love to use them during a workout. I also love to have them on the treadmill during a long run or during an easy run because it feels like I'm snacking, which makes me happy. And I also love the Honey Stinger gels. So those are all great. How does Sarah determine her easy pace? Great question. I run slower than most of the athletes who are right around my same racing pace. It's wild. My easy pace is a jog. I've had teammates tell me that I run too slow. Like legitimately, I might actually be running too slow. I don't know. So there's a few different ways. I run by feel. I always ease into my run. If you follow me on Strava, you will always see that first or second mile come in slow. I'm warming up. It doesn't have to be a race from the start. I love finishing a run feeling strong. I love finishing a run feeling like good. And when I can start out slower, which for me is around 10-minute mile pace or 9:50, 9:45 on a good day, like I can then finish really strong. Now I'm also going uphill. Remember, I like run uphill to start and then I run downhill back. Every day is different. I think that's really important to know. Today I ran 10 miles at 9:42 pace and my legs just felt like lead. And I was also running kind of through snow and ice, which was annoying. So it was just a slow day and I just like leaned into it and it was fine. But then there's going to be other days like yesterday where I felt really amazing at like 9:05 pace. So for me, that's a little bit more on the faster side of my easy day. But what I have leaned into since working with my current coach, because we upped my mileage so much and it's something I wanted, it's something she wanted, I've really slowed down. So I've been able to stay healthy and I run most weeks I'm running 60 or 70 miles without much of a break, which I know is its own thing. And I shouldn't be really promoting that, but that is something that I'm in right now. And so taking my easy and recovery runs slower is helping me be able to do that. And I have to say, like, my racing is faster, right? So, like, you can look at, like, what's your half marathon race pace and back up, like, 2.5 minutes, and that's your easy pace? Or what's your marathon race pace? Or what's your marathon PR? Like back up maybe a minute and a half from that, right? 5K would be like 3 minutes. The 10K would kind of fall a little bit around there. So it does kind of work out, right? So like my half marathon pace is 6:39, and I run anywhere on easy days between like 9:05 on like a good day, a, a very good day. And good meaning I feel really good and poppy, and I'm not pushing it. It still feels very easy, to like 9:40, which is more than norm. So it gets to be on feel, and every single day gets to be different. My favorite recovery tools. Oh my gosh, I have cracked the code on recovery. I'm so excited about this. The Normatec travel boots are amazing, and I love them because they don't take up a lot of space. You can walk around in them, which is great because I have a hard time like sitting down, although I love a good TV show at night, to like veg and just be in like my like little travel boots. What I love about the travel boots is that you can actually take them with you traveling in the suitcase. So they fit on your leg from like below the knee to above the ankles. They just hit the calf area, but they're also like you can also like adjust them and put them on your quads and hamstrings if you want to, which is awesome. I love the Coach Soak Epsom salts. Those are by far the best Epsom salts I've used. They're pricey, they're expensive. They're like $25 for a bag. And maybe it's mental, but I feel like I do that before a workout and before a long run. And it's always been the best I've run. Like last fall, that's all I was doing. Tuesday nights, Friday nights. Coach soak Epsom salts. 20 minutes, it's all you need. Hydrate like a freaking beast because the magnesium will dehydrate you, and you don't want to go into a workout or a long run dehydrated. I love Noon for like happy hour cocktails with sparkling water. So that's just a little bit of extra electrolytes, but obviously like Scratch and Runway are also really great. I would call them a tool because it does rehydrate me because I sweat a lot, and I'm always like feeling like I need to catch up on how much I'm drinking and staying hydrated and not having a dry mouth and like all of those things. So love that. And my resistance band, I would say, is a really great recovery tool, and just getting in that mobility several times a week. Glute bridges, monster walks, clamshells. Those are all so, so helpful with recovery. And then, of course, another and my most favorite tool is sleep. And I just feel so good and really so powerful when I say to myself, like, go, like, let's go to bed early tonight or earlier, and I actually do it. And so earlier for me is like 8:30 or 9, and then sleeping until like 5 or 5:30. And that usually feels really good because if I can get a good night's sleep and I feel really good the next day, like, one, your body is recovering while you sleep. So then it goes hand in hand with like easy pace and higher mileage, but you're also just able to do more. And it always makes me very, very nervous when I hear athletes say how little sleep they get, because that is like playing with fire. Something could definitely happen sooner rather than later. All right. How does someone become a running coach? All of those recovery tools, by the way, are going to be listed in the description of the podcast. So you can just click on it and get what you need. How does someone become a running coach? Okay. I feel like it's creating an Instagram account and just creating an Instagram account and starting posting about running. So, and obviously I'm joking. So like 4 years ago when I became a coach, I didn't want to become a coach because I felt like everyone was a coach, especially living in Boulder. It was something that I just didn't want to tap into. And then I eventually came around to it, and I was like, you know what? You can be different. You can be a different type of coach. And I love being a different type of coach. I think the athletes that I work with can share more about that and what I do, but like I feel like I up level it in a different way. It's also the thing that could be the thing that's taking me down. I just care so much. And it can be very, very stressful, but I care so much. So how does one become a running coach? You can do it in so many different ways. there's so much like that we learn through our own training, right? There's so much that we can learn through amazing books, and I'll list them in the description. Matt Fitzgerald is an amazing author, and has some incredible books. Um, but there's also like different programs that you can take, different certifications that you can get to become a certified running coach. So I think that's going to be like, if you're looking to become a running coach, I would definitely get certified. I think, that is kind of like what you can do to begin. And then it's an ongoing process to learn and to grow and to educate yourself. So there's going to be different ways where you can do that with, like, reading these books and learning through your own training and coaching people and learning through coaching them. But I would say the one thing I wasn't prepared for, the one thing I didn't realize would come up so much in coaching, is that most people can put a training plan together. Am I right? Most people can. It's being there for that person and maybe coaching them in a mindset or in a life way or in a like a pick me up kind of way. And there's a lot of energy that goes into that. And I would say there's more energy that actually goes into that than I think like writing a plan or comment. Well, sometimes the comment is that, but there's a lot of mental coaching that goes on, which I didn't know getting into this. There's a lot. There's a lot. And I think if you're a good coach, there's a lot, right? I think there are coaches who could just be like not seeing or hearing an athlete, right? So if you're looking to be a coach, I'd highly, highly get certified. RRCA. If you Google running coach certifications, there's others. That's the most basic one. It's over the course of a weekend. You take a test. It's pass fail. It's very easy. There's other more in-depth courses. What's super funny is my coach last summer, she was prepping for New York City and she was getting bombarded with questions that she emailed all of us. And she's like, please get your run coaching certification. And she like linked which one to do. And she's like answer your own questions, people. And I thought it was hilarious because on the coaching side of me, I knew exactly what she was going through, but I thought it was hilarious. So if you want to learn more about like, being a coach and different things, like obviously a certification is great and you can learn so much from like others and your peers and books and YouTube videos. But I will say there is going to be a threshold, right? Because there are YouTube videos, there are Instagram accounts and Instagram reels I see where I'm just like shaking my head, where it's like this person with like a crazy amount of followers and they're saying things that, like, in my opinion, are not true, but they don't, it's like they don't know. So there's a lot that goes into it. And you can become certified, you can learn a lot, and we can learn and grow from each other. So I'm going to leave it at that. Why? Okay, this is the last question. Why did you run a 25-mile long run in your CIM prep? So I got this question the weekend I did it, and I didn't know. And then I found out, I asked my coach the week of the race. So typically, when you're in a marathon prep, you might run 18, you might run 20 miles, you might run 16 miles, and that's your longest long run. And it's one of those distances where a lot of new runners don't understand why they're not running 26.2 miles, because when you run a half marathon, some people run over 13 miles in training, right? Not everyone, but some do. Same with a 5K and a 10K, but why not with the marathon? Well, there's so much stress that develops over the course of a training week and a training block and a cycle that you don't actually have to go that far in training. You can run quality 18 and 20-mile long runs, taper, and have the energy and the fitness to run 26.2 strong, happy, confident, right? So over the course of my CIM prep, sometimes I would have like these bookmarks of workouts and long runs. And so I had like some 24s in there and then they got pulled. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm so excited. Oh, it got pulled. And then it was the week after I ran the Indianapolis half marathon PR and we went into like no recovery. My workout shifted to a Thursday. It was like a baby workout. I did like 12 by 200 meters at half marathon pace was basically what it was, just to like get the legs to turn over. And then on Sunday, we did this 25-mile long run with a 5-mile warm up, 20 miles at moderate pace, which was 20 seconds under what the target pace was for CIM, which actually turned out to be the pace that I ran at CIM. So I ran 20 miles. I was very, very excited about this. I didn't really tell anyone I was doing it. I was just like, this is going to be so great. So the workout was very hard mentally, not so much physically. I mean, I was definitely done, but like it was a very mental workout because I needed to stay. She wanted me to stay within a 10-second radius. So I did that. And when I asked her about it, she said, she runs long runs like this in her prep, that over the course of when you're stacking, 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 she's always trying to find a way to stress your body, as am I as a coach with each athlete. I have the time, I have the dedication. She knows whatever she asks, I do. And that's true. That's how I am. Like, she wants me to do this, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to like make an excuse as to why or tell her I can't. I'm just going to do it. But I'm also going to show up the right way. And I had been recovering very well in this prep. I had been executing all my workouts and long runs. I had a lot of confidence. And she's like, I knew you could do it. And I felt like it was going to be that thing that really helped you at CIM. So that's why I had a 25-mile long run in my CIM prep. I have never given a long run over 22 miles to athletes. And typically those athletes are either very advanced or they're advanced training at altitude. And there's just a lot of stress that comes with that. And so it's a very personalized decision. And when I posted about it, I felt a little weary um, because there were people that I was coaching and people that I knew that were watching that were beginner athletes, and then they started to question their own training. And that didn't feel good. I didn't want them questioning their own training. They were rocking their training. And so I think we all know that with each training cycle, we can build more, we can do more, we can be more, right? More isn't always good, right? I probably peaked that following week. Who knows? But what I do know is that comparison is the thief of joy. And anytime we compare ourselves to anyone, whether they're running the same race as us, whether we're running next to them in a workout, it not only takes away the joy of running for you, but that other person probably is picking up on it too. Because there's cues, there's different things that can be picked up on if you're comparing yourself to that other person without even saying anything. So, as I close this episode, I'd love for you to lean into you and your training and everything that you're going to create in 2024. I think this is another long episode, but I promise we'll get back on track next week. And I really appreciate you. I appreciate you for listening, for being and supporting an Elevate Your Running podcast listener. And I would love for you to rate, subscribe, leave a review on Spotify and Apple or your podcast listening platform. I appreciate you so much. I hope you have a lovely and great week.